if you ask the man on the street, what is a lawyer? Chances are you will get an answer along this line. Well, a lawyer is somebody who handles a case, goes to court, and argues. Well, come to think of it, that is a fair enough assessment of what a lawyer is. It basically summarizes what he does. Handles a case, goes to court, and argues. That is basically litigation. It is simplest, barest description. To paraphrase Forrest Gump, well, lawyer is what lawyer does. Mga kompanyeros, kompanyeras, if you are a lawyer or a law student or someone with a big interest in law, you know what I'm talking about. Cayetano versus Monsod. We have a very interesting topic today. The case of Cayetano versus Monsod takes us back to the 1980s and the 1990s, right after the EDSA revolution. It was a time of joyous celebration over a newfound democracy. The new freedom that was earned by Filipinos the hard way after years of oppression under a dictatorship. It was the pandemic in reverse, because instead of sufferings, there was a certain joy in the air. People are kind to each other. People are in the mood to be idealistic. People are motivated to do the right thing. So then President Corazon Aquino would like to preserve the spirit of patriotism and freedom that Filipinos discovered anew. So she decided that a meaningful revamp on the system of elections or the electorate is necessary to preserve the democracy that we just earned. She nominated Attorney Christian Monsod to the position of election commissioner. On first glance, Attorney Monsod seems to really fit the bill. He is a man of integrity, he has a good reputation, and intelligence-wise, he really makes the grade. Well, if that name rings a bell, Christian Monsod, well, that's because he is the husband of economist and academician and columnist Solita Winnie Monsod. Both of them are actually world-renowned economists. However, not everybody is giving the vote of confidence to Attorney Monsod. One in particular, Attorney Rene Cayetano, said, "Hey, hold your horses, wait a minute. I think Attorney Monsod, for all his credentials, does not meet the qualifications, particularly in the category of at least 10 years in the practice of law." Well, if that name also rings a bell, Senator Rene Cayetano, that's because he is the father of now sibling senators Pia and Alan Peter Cayetano. According to Senator Cayetano, the late Senator Cayetano, well, Senator Christian Monsod spent so much of his professional life as an economist, more than he did as a lawyer. He was actually engaged by the World Bank for practically the entirety of his career, not as a lawyer, but as an economist. And he was actually very competent at the job. And if there are legal activities or legal challenges that he confronted during his time with the World Bank, those are incidental to his full-time job as an economist. Well, that opposition from Attorney Cayetano evolved into a lawsuit, and that lawsuit took a life of its own and went all the way to the Supreme Court, asking the million-dollar question to the magistrates: what then is the practice of law? Was Attorney Christian Monsod able to meet the criteria of at least 10 years in the practice of law? Well, the Supreme Court answered in favor of Attorney Monsod. According to the Supreme Court, any activity that requires a lawyer's skill, a lawyer training, a lawyer knowledge, when performed by the lawyer and applying what he knows, is already considered the practice of law. So for instance, you taught a law subject in a law school, or you draft a legal instrument, or you render legal advice, that already constitutes the practice of law. It is not, the practice of law is not confined only to the general popular idea of a lawyer going to court and representing clients. Although the image of the abogado de Campanilla is very predominant and deeply imbibed in the national consciousness, it does not define what a lawyer is, because a lawyer does so much more than appear in court and argue his case. Well, that should be the end of the story, right? Well, not really, because when I was reading the decision once again, I was basically moved by one dissenting opinion, the one raised by Justice Isagani Cruz, who was so eloquent as usual. According to Justice Isagani Cruz, well, I do not have the facility for language to quote him verbatim or to say in my own words in equally elegant language his dissent. But this basically is the gist of his opposition. According to Justice Cruz, well, we should define a word by what its usual connotation is. And I'm referring to the word practice. When we say the practice of law, the word practice would imply continuity. It will imply habituality, constancy. It will imply a sustained activity that is performed over a period of time. In the case, however, of Attorney Christian Monsod, he was, as correctly pointed out by the petitioner, Attorney Cayetano, well, Attorney Christian Monsod is an economist more than anything else. He was engaged by the World Bank not because of his expertise as a lawyer, but because of his world-renowned abilities as an economist. So if ever his work with the World Bank would make him confront certain legal issues every now and then, such occasions are merely incidental, because again, according to Isagani Cruz, practice means continuity, habituality, constancy, consistency, and a sustained effort in performing an activity which cannot be said of someone who is doing the lawyering as a part-time job and being an economist full-time. Well, I do not know in my humble self who is correct, Justice Paras or Justice Isagani Cruz, and I don't think I have the qualifications to make a judgment call which one presented the better argument. But I would say the definition of Justice Paras of the practice of law is more favorable to lawyers because it does not limit lawyering to one specific activity. And what really convinced me about the soundness of Justice Paras's argument was his analogy with the biblical story. Imagine, he took inspiration from the Bible, specifically the story of Samson and Delilah, to end his decision. This is what Justice Paras said. Well, when Delilah agreed to betray Samson and cut his hair short so that he will lose his supernatural strength and the soldiers of the emperor can capture him, Delilah only asked for one condition: that no sword touches his skin and no blood drips from his vein. So what the emperor did was to ask one of his soldiers to get the burning metal iron marker, the one they used to mark cattle, and hold it so close to the eyes of Samson to the point where his eyeballs melted and he became permanently blind. Of course, when Delilah knew this, she became very enraged. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned, so to speak. So she confronted the emperor and reminded him in the strongest terms about their agreement that no sword touches his skin and no blood drips from his veins. But the emperor said, well, did you see any sword touch his skin? Did you see any drop of blood drip from his veins? None. So with that, the emperor was able to pull a plus one over Delilah. So what does it have to do with our argument over the practice of law? Well, Justice Paras is saying that we should not limit the interpretation of the word practice of law to the limited interpretation that the oppositors and the dissenters are suggesting. We should not, to quote again Paras, interpret using the words that killeth, but the spirit that giveth life. In other words, the limited interpretation should not prevail over the broad interpretation that lawyering is not limited to litigation, but should encompass any and all activity, anything and everything that has something to do with law and would take a lawyer's skills, training, and knowledge to perform. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's Cayetano versus Monsod for you. I feel honored again, and it's my pleasure to be discussing to you that topic in my YouTube channel. I hope next time you will make it a habit to visit my YouTube channel every now and then and take the time maybe to comment and get in touch with me. Marami pong salamat. Again, I'm Attorney Adel, and this vlog, it's about lawyering and the lawyer, writing and the writer. It's about dog in the courtroom. Maraming salamat po.